My name's Mike Dolphson, and I work on the Microsoft education team. And today we've got Bill Sluss and Jethro Seghers, who are some colleagues of mine, and they're going to go deep into configuring M365 Copilot Chat for IT admins. And this is going to include Students 13 Plus and some other new features that recently updated. So, Bill, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thanks everybody for having us. Definitely appreciate it. Excited to have this session. Today we're focusing on M365 Copilot and Copilot Chat. We'll talk about a few different core concepts. So I'm going to start by kicking it off and diving into what Copilot is. There's kind of some nuance and variance with terminology just to clarify out of the gate. We'll talk a little bit about what safety features and capabilities you get out of the box. Then I'll pivot and we'll dive a little bit into what it takes to actually turn on Copilot, what some of the advanced management capabilities are. I'll hit very quickly on School Data Sync, a correlated update that we have there. And then I'm going to kick it over to Jethro, and he's going to share a great update around Model Context Protocol, MCP. So with that, let's dive right in. Okay, so before we start talking about IT admin setup, deployment, management capabilities, I think it's always good to kind of first level set what is Copilot, just because there has been confusion in the past. And so just to clarify, there's kind of three core components when you think about Copilot. So the first is going to be Copilot Chat. And what this is our free tool. It's available as long as you have at least an Office 365 A1 license. You can get access to Copilot Chat, and it's the LLM, so it's the same latest model that you would get through some consumer AIs. So we offer ChatGPT 5 now. So you get the LLM, plus you get web search and content on top of that LLM. So that is our sort of free tier. And then we have a paid tier, which is M365 Copilot. And what this brings to the game is additional data integration. So all of your data within the M365 tenant becomes available to Copilot to add an additional layer of intelligence to reference all of those files and documents sitting in SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, your email, and all of that. A whole lot of goodness comes with M365 Copilot. And then don't lose sight of the final component in the story, and that's our agents and connectors. And this is where you can extend Copilot to add additional features and functionality. You can even extend data access outside of the immediate data access that M365 Copilot gets you. So you can integrate with external data sources and bring in data from there and add to the AI goodness that you get. And so those are the main three core components. Agents, of course, comes with M365 Copilot, but then there's also a pay-as-you-go model where you can run the meter and run them independently. But those are the three major components just for clarity out of the gate. And the biggest announcement probably for us going over the summer was in August, we announced availability to students 13 and plus. So previously, we had only made Copilot available to those 18 and over, and now we support 13 and over. And so today, we're really going to focus on what it means to enable Copilot for that user population and everyone, quite frankly, in EDU tenants, and what it means to manage it. So before we get into the different configurations and management capabilities, I think it's good to just double down on what Copilot brings out of the box. So regardless of whether you're using Copilot Chat or M365 Copilot or your agents that integrate with Copilot, this is what you're going to get in terms of safety and default protection. So everything that Copilot does exists within the context of your tenant boundary. So just like every other M365 app, all of your data is secure. We also encrypt all of your data at rest and in transit. So any data that you feed in to Copilot stays within your compliance boundary. Another really important capability that really sets us apart from, I think, many of the consumer-based AIs that a lot of students, teachers, faculty, and staff are using today is that because it's within your boundary, we commit to not using any of that data to train foundational models. So while we have the great LLMs, the latest and greatest models that are available, you want to protect all of that PII. So if someone uploads any personally identifiable information into the model, you know that it's never going to find its way back into the model training. It all stays within your tenant and will never be used. to train. And that's not something to take for granted in EDU. A lot of organizations have PII requirements for compliance. And so you got to be really careful about opening up and enabling your end user population to use and access those consumer AIs that are out there and available that don't make similar commitments. So just be aware everything you do in Copilot stays private. And then the other thing is that we always respect your compliance and data governance configuration within your tenant. So everything that you set up in Purview, and I'll talk a little bit about that today, all of that ports forward into the Copilot experience. So if you lock down your data estate, Copilot doesn't grant any new access to data. In particular, when you're using something like M365 Copilot that integrates with OneDrive and SharePoint, it doesn't grant new access. It's only going to leverage the access that it already has. So if you lock down your data estate, something like Purview or even just basic SharePoint and OneDrive permissioning, all of that ports into the Copilot experience. The last thing I'll mention on default safety and protection is that out of the box, we also include a content safety stack. And this is super critical in particular for K-12 education tenants. So we filter content across 4 core categories of harm. So you'll get adult and sexual content, violent content, self-harm, and hate, all filtered out of the box with an additional layer of jailbreak protection that prevents students from working around those inherent guardrails. So just know that that also comes, you don't have to do anything extra to set that up. You get that the second you enable Copilot for any of your end users. Now, we've covered sort of the default safety configuration at a high level, but what does that actually mean to turn it on? So we now have Copilot available to 13 plus. It's time to roll it out. What do you actually have to do to take that step? You should first know that we didn't turn it on by default. So in some cases, some platforms, some AIs are going to be available by default. We did not do that. We wanted to make sure that it is a very intentional step for the EDU institution to take. And in order to turn on Copilot and make it available to students, faculty, staff, you have to do 2 specific things. So the first is we have a gate called tenant identifier. And I'm going to show you exactly where that is and what the settings are, but it basically comes down to defining in your education tenant whether you're a K-12 organization or a higher ed institution. And so that's tenant ID. And that is combined then with our age group setting. And so for students, you can define them as a minor, a not adult, which is our version of teen, or an adult. So those are the 3 available age group settings that you can configure on a per user basis. And you should know that the tenant ID informs how Copilot rationalizes over students who have not set the age group attribute. And so if you set the tenant ID attribute, if you set tenant ID as a higher ed institution, then we infer that all students in your tenant are adult by default. And so you actually don't have to take the additional step to go through and set that age group. We highly recommend it because we're going to add more capabilities that leverage that age group to customize and tailor the experience. But if you have a higher education tenant and you set that tenant identifier, the inference is that all of those students are adult. However, in K-12, if you set your tenant identifier to K-12, and many of you will, you have to take the additional step in order to enable age group, because without enabling the age group attribute, the inference is going to be that all of your students are minor. So you have to set it in order to grant access to Copilot Chat, M365 Copilot, all of the agents that go along with it. And so there you have to take that step, set the age group for all of your students. Only ones that are marked as either not adult or adult will actually get access to Copilot. So if you mark a student as minor, for example, you can be licensed even, assign an M365 Copilot license. They're still not going to be able to get access because of the tenant policy that's configured. We only support 13 plus, and so you have to be either a not adult or adult in order to access Copilot in an M365 tenant. So super important. You can see the chart there and the breakdown based on your matrix of K-12 versus higher ed and the age group attribute and the access. So where do you actually go to set these things and turn it on? This is a brand new feature and setting that we just shipped in the M365 admin center. So tenant ID, it's super easy. You go into the Mac portal. And then on your left-hand navigation rail, you just scroll down on the left until you get to the Settings tab. Underneath of Settings, then you're going to go to Org Settings, which is the sub-tab on the left-hand navigation. And then once you drill into Org Settings, you're going to get 3 tabs that show up along the top. So you'll see Services, Security, and Privacy, also Organizational Profile. So you want the Services tab that is there. And then if you scroll down the list of settings that are available, you're going to find one called Microsoft Education Tenant Identifier. Everybody can do this while we're on the call right now if you want to go ahead and set it. It's just a very simple radio button that you configure. Select either K-12 or higher ed based on your organizational type. Okay, really easy. Settings, Org Settings, Services, Microsoft Education Tenant Identifier. That is the first step to enabling Copilot, either our free version or paid version if you want to make it available to students. Now, the next thing that you got to configure is age group. That's what we talked about. That's the second configuration that's absolutely needed for your student population in order to make sure that they can get access. Now, today, there are 3 ways to configure age group. So the first is we have the Enter ID Admin Center, or the Enter Admin Center. It's great if you want to go in and set a single individual user. You go to the users, you search up whatever user you want, and then underneath, I think it's called Parental Controls, as a sub-tab underneath that, you can define the corresponding age group. But it's really only for one-offs. So if you want to need to modify a single user or a handful of users, it's great. But other than that, you're probably going to want to look at a bulk option. So if you're trying to define age group for a lot of users in your tenant, one of the second 2 options is going to be available. For any customers that are running school data sync, we have an option where you can now enable the age group attribute right there in the SDS outbound flow. And so you can define for all of your students that are flowing out to synchronizing with Entra ID, the corresponding age group to set on them. And then for anybody who's comfortable with and likes PowerShell or wants to run a command line interface against Graph API, that option is also available. It's directly on the user's API, so you don't have to look for any wild APIs. It's right on the top level user's API, and you'll see age group as a property that you can modify there. So those are the 3 that we have today. And in great Microsoft fashion, not to make things overcomplicated, but we're offering you now a 4th way. So this is something that everyone should see within about the next week. And this is a new configuration to manage age group right there in the N365 Admin Center. It's going to be in the exact same location as the one I just mentioned for tenant identifier. So you don't have to go anywhere different. Still under the settings, org settings, services, and then Microsoft Education Tenant ID. Really easy to find. We're going to add it on the same tab. And in fact, I think we're going to shorten the name of that tab and just unify all of our Microsoft Education settings there from that point forward. So you'll see a shorter name that shows up, but that is the path. That's going to be the same path that you use going forward. And we couldn't make this option more simple. I realize this is the 4th option, and that sounds confusing, but the goal here was to make it as easy as possible to set age group in the Mac. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So the first thing that you're going to do is create a simple CSV file called users.csv. Couldn't be more straightforward, and all you need are 2 basic columns. Now, this isn't like school data sync where you got to upload data and it's a continuous synchronization process or anything complex like that. It's a point in time update. So you can put 5 users in here, you can put 5,000 users in here. It doesn't matter. And then when you're done, you can add another 5 users or another 5,000, whatever you need to do. It's a point in time upload, and it only will loop through and update whatever you throw into the CSV. So you create your CSV file, those 2 columns. One thing to note is the first column that you see, it does use user principal name. However, there's spaces in between user, principal, and name. And we took that format in particular because there was already a user report within the M365 Admin Center that is in that format. And so it's useful to align there, even though everyone knows that there should be no spaces in that. It's just a single consistent string. But make sure you have the spaces in there: user space, principal space, name. And then you define the age group. So for every one of your users, once you drop the UPN in the first column, you drop the age group in the second column. And then in that UI, all you got to do is click the upload users button. So upload users, select your CSV, and it will just go. And then there's a third step. Once the process completes, it's just a quick bulk upload. And depending on the volume of users will really determine the amount of time it takes to loop through them all. But it's basically the same thing as running like a looping PowerShell script. It's going to loop through all of the users that you provide. And then you can run the third step, which is really just clicking the download users button, and then you generate a report and validate that all of those users have been set appropriately. And again, you can run this as many times as you need. You can update users. It will set it for the first time. It will modify it if they change age groups along the way. But again, tenant identifier and age group, this is how you make Copilot accessible for your student population and everybody in your tenant. Go set these things if you want to use Copilot. Pivoting beyond just access, so now that we've covered sort of how to turn it on and provide users access, you should know a couple of the most critical controls that are available. So this is not an exhaustive list. There are many more settings and configurations, but I think these are some of the most critical. So I want to just kind of run through what's available to modify the experience, what people have access to beyond just the on and off switch that I just talked about. So the first, there's a handful of settings that allow you to disable and block certain bits of functionality within Copilot broadly. So the first one, obviously, if you just want to block Copilot Chat outright, you can do that through the integrated apps function. It's also in the M365 Admin Center. So super easy if for whatever reason you just want to take that extra step and turn it off. Again, it's off by default, but it is there available to you. One of the big ones, and in particular, you'll find this in some other platforms, it's enabled by default. We do not enable it by default. And in some consumer AIs, it's actually completely disabled. But we do allow you to block image generation. So if for whatever reason you're concerned about generation of images, you can go under the Copilot control system. There's a single setting there. You can just turn it off, and then image generation is disabled. You can also block the ability to search against the web. So if you remember back, the basically what Copilot Chat and all of the others get you, you get the LLM, but then you also have the ability to search live web content. So you can turn off that web search capability, which is great if you want to lock that down for whatever reason. One that's probably important to EDU that you want to check and make sure that you're blocking, unless of course you want it, is that you can disable self-service purchase. So if you don't want faculty, staff, teachers in there buying their own Copilot licenses, make sure you check and set that setting. And then the last one, just straight out disablement, you can disable personalization. So this is one where I would strongly encourage keeping personalization enabled. That correlates to memory, and that allows the AI to become more personalized over time. It learns who you are and what types of information you're asking about. The entire experience becomes customized when you keep personalization on. But if you need to disable personalization, the option is there for you. You can disable that memory. A lot of on the consumer side, you'll see that. But because everything stays within the boundary of the M365 tenant, that personalization feature is actually quite useful when leveraging something like Copilot versus a typical consumer AI. So those are the big disable and blocks. Of course, there are others, but those are the ones I think are the most relevant for EDU. And then beyond that, you get a bunch of configurations to sort of tailor the experience, where you want Copilot to show up and in what capacity. So you can disable it in Teams or turn it off for team meetings. If you're running Edge browser in your organization and you deploy that through Intune settings and configuration, maybe you require Edge, but you don't want Copilot to show up there, you can disable that. And then, of course, within all of the Office apps, there is the option to disable there as well. So you have the full range. It doesn't turn off Copilot. It just disables it out of those particular experiences. So the main chatbot experience would still be there, These are just settings that actually tailor the end user experience and where they can interact with Copilot. And then the last thing, definitely don't overlook it, is the configuration of agents and connectors, right? That's the third major pillar of Copilot management. And so, of course, we give you the ability to block agents. You can also turn off agent creation if you don't want students, faculty, staff creating agents and cluttering up your agent directory. You can block the creation of them. And then you can also manage the pinning experience. So basically what agents show up for end users as they're engaging with Copilot. Those are probably some of the most critical settings. Of course, review all of them and figure out what's most important to you, but just know that these exist. And I strongly encourage looking at these in particular as you're thinking about a rollout. Now, beyond just sort of out-of-the-box settings, when you're rolling out Copilot, there are some advanced controls that we offer as well. All of these that I'm going to talk about are within the context of Microsoft Purview. So this is a premium offering. It's not an out-of-the-box capability that you get just in the OA1 or MA1 level. You have to step up. I believe it's at the A5 for faculty. I'm not sure on the student use benefit, but Microsoft Purview is our data security, data governance, data compliance suite. And in particular, when you get to M365 Copilot, it becomes absolutely critical to secure and lock down your data estate. But then there's also some features in here that are incredibly useful in just thinking about protecting your EDU institution with third-party AI use. And so I'm going to highlight just a few really quick. A lot of people tend to think about Purview and they think about information protection and sensitivity labels. But I'm going to highlight what I think are the most critical capabilities to be aware of and probably configure if you're looking to lock down and secure an AI experience for your organization within M365. So the first is communication compliance. It is a great tool in particular for younger populations. So as you think about 13 plus, communication compliance allows IT administrators to configure policies that detect sensitive information or harmful information in those users' engagement with Copilot. So if you have students, maybe they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and you want to make sure that anytime they're asking or prompting for things that are inappropriate content or something specific to a topic like self-harm, suicide, you can monitor for that and alert on it. And all of those alerts get rendered within the Purview dashboard. Super useful in particular in K-12, but certainly more broadly as well. Data security posture management is another great tool, in particular, not just in the context of Copilot, but as you're thinking about AI enablement, we know students, faculty, staff, they're already using third-party consumer AIs within the organization. And so it implies risk in that if you don't lock down and secure that flow of information from the user out to those consumer AIs, you can find that a lot of PII finds their way into AI that doesn't offer the same level of protection that you get with enterprise data protection and protecting PII and keeping data within the tenant boundary, right? If somebody can just upload data. And so what DSPM offers you is the insight of which third-party AIs are actually being used within your organization. So if you want to take the additional step of shutting down web access or a particular app, you have the knowledge to know what to turn off and block. Also, Purview offers endpoint and browser DLP, which takes an additional step and prevents the uploading and copying and pasting of sensitive data and content into those third-party AIs. So these are three top-line features you should definitely be aware of. There are many others in Purview that are fantastic for broader data security and data governance. But when it comes to AI, these are the three that I think you should be aware of if you're evaluating whether Purview makes sense for you and your organization. So with that, mentioned School Data Sync earlier. In the context of Copilot management, one thing that School Data Sync does is we create administrative units. It's at least until this point, it's been mostly thought of as enabling delegated administration, where you enable an administrator with certain permissions for a select portion of your broader directory. However, when you're configuring Purview and all of the data security capabilities that we just talked about, AUs are increasingly important. And so you can use administrative units to scope and configure all of the policies across Purview. And so don't overlook the value of provisioning out on a per school basis, or even more broadly, administrative units through SDS. Also, bringing in external data becomes incredibly valuable for MCP, which is what Jethro is going to cover here in just a second. We did add the ability in SDS to configure age group. I already mentioned it, but now you can do it on a per outbound flow configuration. So if you have an outbound configuration for just your elementary schools, as an example, you can set all of those students to minor. If you have one for, say, your high schools, you can set all of those students to a not adult or our teen setting, and so on. And then last but not least, because it's IT admin, I just want to mention our Microsoft Digital Defense Report for 2025 is released at that AKA link. If anybody's thinking about cybersecurity more broadly than just AI enablement, which I would encourage everyone to do, go and check out that Digital Defense Report. It is incredible. It's a wealth of knowledge. Definitely check it out. With that, I'm turning it over to Jethro.
Awesome. I'm going to take very quickly control here. So just in a few minutes, because we know we're getting up to half of the hour. What is MCP? So if you've been on LinkedIn or other platforms following a lot of the AI enhancements and new technology, you probably have seen up the term MCP, Model Context Protocol. Model Context Protocol is really a technology that helps AI retrieve data, reason over data that potentially was not available a few months ago. So if you wanted to, for example, bring in web content or connect with M365 APIs, you really had to build a whole system around that. With MCP, the Model Context Protocol, it's really designed with AI in mind. It's also an industry standard. So this is not necessarily a Microsoft technology. This is a technology that Microsoft uses. Before we get too academic and what it does, let me actually use that in an example. So you've probably all are familiar with the Microsoft Learn website. All the information Bill shared with you is available there. But let's be honest, finding sometimes what you need to do, how to configure certain things is very hard to do. It uses a traditional search, so you need to be able to use the right search terms. You can't really present a scenario and get the right information. Now, what the Learn team has done is build an MCP server around it. And so what does it actually do? It allows you to use natural language to find information. So what you have on the right-hand side, and I know it's hopefully legible to everybody, but you get the slide deck, so you will be able to go back, is, for example, using the scenario we're talking about today, I want to enable Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat for 13 plus. How do I do that? So what actually is going to happen is the large language model, so in this case, I'm using Sonnet, will actually take that information, try with the MCP server to find the relevant information, reason over it, and give you a natural language answer back. You can go back and forth. So you don't even have to go to the website. So in this case, what I said is using the Microsoft documentation, I need to set up the right age group for my students so they have access to Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. Students are 13 plus. So it gives you all the information, the same information that Bill actually presented, so you know it's the real stuff. But what I did afterwards was like, hey, I also want to do this through PowerShell. Are there options for PowerShell? And it actually gave me all the right scripts that I can now use directly in here. Now, my organization also uses SDS, and I said, hey, I want to use SDS for this. Is this possible? So it's just going to find the additional information based on the conversation that I have. Now, why am I doing this in Visual Studio Code with GitHub Copilot? Both are free for you guys to use. GitHub Copilot is free for education, both for administrators, faculty, and students, and of course, Visual Studio Code as well. Now, this is actually just a very easy way to retrieve information, find information. If you go to the Microsoft Learn website and go to the MCP section, it actually sets it up for you. So there's very little for you to do. And you can then immediately start asking questions there. Now, MCP is something that Microsoft is very heavily investing in. including ourselves. So we will do a number of announcements in the next few weeks around MCP and Microsoft Education. Now, because unfortunately this is not an under NDA platform, I have to reference to you Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Ignite will share a lot of confidence or a lot of information around MCP. Same thing for us. And after Ignite, we will be able to share a lot more. Now, Microsoft Ignite is free online. So if you want to join, register online, watch the episodes. If you have questions about MCP, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. That's where I post most of my stuff around MCP. Happy to share more. But that's, I see that we got a little bit over. Thank you for staying on. If you have more questions, Bill and I will definitely cover the ones that we didn't get to. And if you have more information that you want to, feel free to reach out to us.